Welcome to episode 3 of On the House. Today we are going to talk about a question that is relevant to anyone involved in a real estate transaction. I'm Reena Agarwal, Senior Research Economist at Veros Real Estate Solutions.
And my name is Eric Fox. I'm Chief Economist at Veros Real Estate Solutions. So we've already had 2 episodes thus far, Reena. Our first episode was tips for first-time home buyers. And then our last episode, episode number 2, we talked a little bit about how much is my house worth. And so what do we want to discuss today?
So I think we are going to take the discussion a step forward from episode 2. So when a house hits the market, there are many voices claiming to know what is the value of that house. There is the seller that has been living in that house for many years, perhaps, and they know that house really well. There is the buyer who's looking to buy that house. And then we have the real estate agents on both sides, the buyer's real estate agent and the seller's real estate agent. So who truly holds the most accurate knowledge of the value of that house? I have an opinion about it, but I'm going to ask you, is it the real estate agents who know best what is the value of a house?
Well, that's a very good suggestion, a very good thought as to who might have the most knowledge of the value of a specific house. After all, real estate agents are professionals. They deal with it every single day. But even within the real estate agents, and I've worked with many real estate agents over the years, there's a distribution or bell-shaped curve, we say a lot. Some are very, very good. Some are typical. Some maybe aren't so good. But I wanted to just kind of highlight the huge spectrum of expertise that exists across real estate agents. One time, a long time ago, I was selling a house. I lived in a community of about 500 homes. And there was a gal, her name was Tammy. I won't say Tammy's last name, but if Tammy's listening, I'm sure she knows who she is. And she was a superstar in our community. Every single time a house would sell, she was the listing agent. It was her sign with her smiling face on every single sign in the front yard. She sent us calendars every year with her picture on it that we hung on our refrigerators to remind us every day we looked at our refrigerator that she was the superstar agent. She sent us flyers every single time a house sold that she sold. She let us know what it sold for, what she listed it for. We could see that she really got top dollar for the houses. She even did something kind of interesting. When people had garage sales, you could call her and she would give you a sign that you could put along the road that said garage sale this direction. Her picture and name was all over that sign, and people saw it constantly. It was a community of about 500 homes, and she really was the superstar in that neighborhood. And when it came time for me to sell my house, I naturally picked up the phone. I called her. She was over in 30 minutes. 30 minutes later, I had signed a contract. She knew exactly the price, and it sold in less than a week for more than the asking price. And she actually had buyers. Many buyers were looking at that community, and she had the buyers. So she really was a superstar agent in my particular community. So that's, I think, kind of at one extreme, the knowledge of an agent.
So what you're saying is that agents know best in their community, and I guess because they have a real deep understanding of the dynamics happening in that community, right?
Yes.
But then there is that flip side. There are agents who might just have like an overall understanding of a market or particular neighborhoods, but they might not really know what's happening there.
And that precisely correct. I have a friend of a friend who was a realtor My friend used that friend as their realtor to list their house. I kind of questioned my friend. I said, why are you using that realtor?
Mhm.
They live like an hour away. They don't really know this market. And they said, oh, they're a good realtor. They know the market. They listed the house. I said, I think they listed it for way too low of
Mhm.
an amount. And they said, no, they know the market. They looked at the comps. Turns out they had a whole bunch of offers. It sold in one day. They dramatically underpriced it.
Wow.
And it sold for way less than it should have sold. And the reason was that realtor did not have good localized knowledge of that particular neighborhood. And so as a result, we can see a situation where we've got two agents that list properties. One has lived in the community. Tammy lived in that community.
Mhm.
She had her finger on the pulse of that neighborhood. The other agent did not. They didn't even live there. They lived an hour away. They wanted to do it for their friend. I'm not sure that was being a great friend in that scenario. And they ended up with not getting a top dollar for their friend. So that's sort of the realtor perspective from the listing side. Now, have you seen any scenarios from the buying side with that disparity in a real estate agent?
So I can relate to that. We had moved to Orange County here in California, and we started looking for homes. I think we were here for 3 or 4 months, and we thought it would be good to have a home. We were in an apartment then, and we were just looking at some open houses, and we met this realtor at an open house, and she said, hey, are you guys being represented by anyone? And we said, no, we did not have any agent we had signed a contract with. And she said, oh, I know the neighborhood real well, and I'll be happy to help you guys. So we started checking out a few homes with her, and we found this house that we like. My husband and I really like this house. So we asked her, how much should we make an offer? What would be a smart offer? And she just would not give us a price. She would not say anything. And we kept pressing her. And she said, make a full price offer. So we thought, okay, we don't know much. This lady has been in the business. She's right about it. So we make that full price offer. And lo and behold, the seller comes back with a condition saying that they would like to keep staying in the house for up to 6 months until they found a house of their own. And that was not acceptable to us. And our real estate agent was really not working for us. She was just like, okay, she kind of accepted it. So we withdrew our offer, and we said, why did you not say that that is not acceptable? And it kind of slowly came out that she knew the seller's agent. They were kind of working together. She wanted to maximize her commission if we paid a full price offer. So at the end result is we fired her and we started looking for homes on our own till we found somebody else to help us, with the home buying process.
And then ultimately with the new agent, they were better. They knew the values more, and you were successful.
Yeah, so they were not pushy, and they would say, okay, this house maybe perhaps the seller is asking for more, or you could give him a slightly lower offers, things like that. So they were more helpful with the pricing of the offers, I felt. Yeah.
Okay. Well, when I was looking to buy several years ago, actually after Tammy sold my house, I was looking at a different community and buying, and I didn't know any realtors in that area. I was new to the community. So I started looking on my own at open houses. And there was a realtor sitting in the open house, and I walked through and I said, oh, this is not really the house I want, but I sort of like this general area. And the realtor that was sitting in the house said, oh, I can help you if you're not being represented. So similar kind of thing to your story. So I said, oh, great, sure. Well, as this particular realtor started to say, when are you coming back? I'll show you some houses. And I said, well, how about next weekend? So during the week, he's sending me all these flyers for all these houses. And I'm like, this isn't in the part of town I want to buy a house. Oh, I just thought you might like to see various areas. So I said, no, really, I want to see this area where the open house was that you were sitting. And he was very honest with me. He said, well, I'm not really familiar with that part of town. I was just sitting that house for a friend. So then I started feeding him listings. Yeah. I would find one on the internet and say, well, this house, which is really close to your open house, looks like a good house to me. I'd like to see that. And I would like to see this other one. And I'd like to see this next one. And I did that for 3 weekends in a row, probably 40 houses. And really all he did was chauffeured me between houses. He was my chauffeur. And at the end of the day, for being the chauffeur, he got a commission.
Yep.
And I just felt like that was kind of, I did all the work. I should get some of that commission. But he really wasn't very helpful in terms of knowledge of the area at all.
Yeah, so what you're really saying is, this real estate agent is really a broad term. There are some who are experts in their communities. They even have teams, whereas there are real estate agents who might have closed maybe 1 or 2 homes in a whole year, and they just are like working part-time. So there is this whole spectrum of real estate agents with expertise with respect to, the real estate transactions.
Yeah, and I think the overall takeaway of realtors as a group is that they have good general knowledge, some very good, some not so good. But in general, if we looked at just a typical agent, they wouldn't be from that specific neighborhood where the buyer was looking to buy a house, but they would live nearby, maybe within 3, 4, 5 miles, maybe in the same city, maybe an adjacent city. They would have comparables data. So what houses have recently sold, which is on the MLS, the multiple listing service. So they have access to a lot of the data. So I think it's fair for us, at least for now, we can talk about buyers and sellers, maybe relative to real estate agents here, but maybe we'll put realtors in terms of knowledge. We'll just put them in the middle right now. And then when we talk here in a minute about buyers and sellers, we'll say relative to real estate agents, do they know more or less than the realtors?
So from the perspective of a buyer, I think it's good to do some homework, find reviews for a realtor, find a realtor, you're saying, who's an expert in the neighborhood in which a buyer is looking to buy. And also, I think now with the new rules, buyers need to ensure that they talk to the realtor about the various contracts they need to sign and what services the real estate agent is offering, so they know what they are getting into, right? So you're saying we don't know right now where the realtor goes, whether it's in the middle of the category or the bottom or the top. What about the seller? I mean, they are the ones who own the house, and so do they have the most knowledge?
Well, that again is another very good guess, very good suggestion. And let's stop and think about the seller. Who knows more about that specific house, excuse me, that's on the market right now than the seller? The seller, in most cases, has lived in the house.
Yes.
They have seen the just sold flyers from various realtors in that community, so they've probably seen all of the sales prices of the various homes. They know all of the upgrades they've done in their home. They know the repairs that are needed in the home, so they know the warts and everything of the house. They know the school district, whether it's a good or bad. They know the traffic, whether the commute is reasonable. Are there nice parks nearby? They know everything about their house. So it would seem that the seller is a very knowledgeable person to know a lot about the sales price of their home.
But then what about a seller's personal bias or their emotional attachment to their home. I mean, the kids have grown up in that house, and that's their house. So isn't it like the best command, and it should command the most price?
Unfortunately, I think what you have raised is true. Not all sellers, but I think many sellers, when they want to put their house on the market, they don't see the warts. All houses have warts; they're not perfect, but they don't see them. And I know I maybe mentioned a story in a previous podcast about a friend. He knew his comps for the house he was putting on the market, but he constantly told us when we said, we think you listed your house for too much money. Relative to the recent sales in this neighborhood, we think you listed it for too much. He would always say, well, my house is better than all of these other houses. And I said, well, why is your house better than all of these other houses? And he would say things like, well, I got a brand new epoxy on the garage floor, and it was the top grade epoxy I put on the garage floor. And have you seen the chandelier in my foyer? That was a very expensive chandelier. It's very high end, so buyers should love this. Well, the bottom line for both of those things is they're very taste specific.
Right.
A lot of buyers don't care if their garage floor has epoxy. I mean, it's nice, but if it doesn't have it, I'm not going to avoid the house. The chandelier wasn't my personal taste. I would have bought the house, but I wouldn't have paid more because of the chandelier. And he too made the comment, I've raised my kids here. We took extra special care of the house all during, when the kids were growing up, definitely more than the neighbors' families took care of their house. They had stuff all over the yard all the time. So my house is worth far more than the comps. And that's why I'm selling it for more. And ultimately, it didn't sell. After 6 months, the contract that he listed with the agent was for 6 months. And he took it off the market, and it never sold.
So it's a classic case of my house is special, and he basically priced himself out of the market because he thought his home was better than the other homes of similar characteristics, right?
Yes. Now, Rena, I happen to know you've actually analyzed data from the MLS personally, so you can maybe give our listeners some insights. If we look at list prices compared to sale prices, what were your findings?
So I'll give you an example of these homes in Jupiter, Florida. So these homes were built in 1985, 1986 in a planned community. And there are several hundred homes that basically have the same floor plan. They have the same number of bedrooms. They have the same number of bathrooms. They even have pretty much the same square footage. And they all look pretty much the same. And what we saw is that there were a couple of homes that were listed at the same time, but one was listed almost $400,000 to $500,000 more than the other one, but they both sold for around $1 million. And then I also saw an example, which is a flip side. Two homes listed within each other, and they were pretty much the same price, just $50,000 apart. But then one sold for $250,000 more than the second one. So in both these examples, the listing price and the sale prices were very different. And these are all homes which are very similar to each other, except in their upkeep or in their renovations and updates. So, coming back to your point that the seller may not know really what the house is worth.
So based on your formal analysis of a very similar neighborhood with very similar, if not almost identical comparables, sounds like maybe sellers actually know a little bit less because of their personal biases of what the value of their house should be. And the realtor in that example knows more than the seller. And again, we clearly can have a very knowledgeable seller,
Yes.
and they may
Yes.
put their biases aside. But in general, the typical seller, I think you're right, feels like they know just a little bit more. The data suggests from your analysis that's true. And those were not hard examples to find, if I recall.
They are not. No. Yes.
It's not like you looked through thousands of sales and found 5 examples. You looked through dozens of sales and found 8, 10 examples.
That you're right about that. So we found that listing prices are not always equal to the selling prices. They can vary. They can be lower. They can be much higher. And sometimes they are pretty bang on correct. So, we have the whole spectrum here again.
Okay. Well, that takes care of 2 of our 3 experts here at the table.
So let's talk about the buyers. I mean, these are the people who are coming in with fresh eyes. They don't know the house. They may or may not know too much about the neighborhood. If they have seen several houses, they might know more about the neighborhood. So what do you think about the buyer? What examples do you have about the buyer?
Well, initially, I think I've been a buyer many times in my life. I know you've been a buyer many times in your life. We've shown up in new communities. We've known nothing about that community. Of course, we've researched the community a little before we moved there, but we really know very little. So initially, we're just trying to get our bearings. We're looking at different neighborhoods. We're seeing which has better schools, which has better amenities, which one is closer to the freeways, which has the best commute to the office, which one's going to be near the office. And after a while, we start to focus in and we start to say, okay, now we really want to live in this community, or we want to live in the adjacent community. And we start looking at houses. And normally by that time, this community costs a little more. Why is that? Oh, you know what? I want to live in this other community because that's not so important. Perhaps that I live closer to the beach or I live closer to the lake. I don't go to the beach or the lake. So I'm okay living a little closer to the office. So what starts to happen then? Well, I get very micro-focused and the realtor knows what I'm looking for. And the realtor starts showing me houses, 2,000 square feet, 1,900 square feet, 2,100 square feet. They show me houses with 3 bedrooms, with 4 bedrooms, where the 4th bedroom is tiny. They show me 2 bedrooms with a den, so it's could be used as a 3rd bedroom. They show me 2 baths. They show me 2 baths and a powder room. They show me 3 bathrooms where there's 1 that's tiny. They show me 3 car garages. They show me 2 car garages. Then I start to see the prices: 500,000, 490,000, 575, 550, 600,000. And now I start to make these comparisons. Is that money, additional money, worth a 3 car garage instead of a 2 car garage? Does that house cost less because it's got 200 square feet less? Do I want a house that small? And I start making these comparisons. And I might say, well, that $600,000 house compared to that $550,000 house, they're exactly the same house. They're the same model. Right. They were built within a few months of each other. The $600,000 house has only been on the market 1 day. That seller probably doesn't understand the market yet. That $550,000 house has been on the market for 2 weeks, and they probably do understand the market. So I'm going to cross the 600,000 one off the list because they clearly don't understand the market. And so I am starting to get very micro-focused and learn what the value of these different houses are, which ones I find valuable, which ones I don't and are overpriced, just because that's all I'm looking at. I'm kind of that local expert for just that neighborhood.
You're right about that. I mean, continuing my story about when we fired that realtor, we just started going to open houses on our own, in the 4 or 5 cities close to where we live now. And we looked at houses in so many different neighborhoods. We were trying to get a feel of, oh, this area is kind of flat, this area is more hilly. And here in one neighborhood, we thought that the streets were kind of narrower and the houses were cramped. In another neighborhood, it was a gated community. Did we want that? Another community we saw was much more greener than something else we saw. So then we start, going into real minute details about the width of the streets and the parks and the greenery and looking at the neighbors and, how close it is to retail, perhaps the grocery store, and if they have nice walkways or trails nearby. So then you start getting very specific, about what you as a buyer want, really, because this is probably the biggest investment you're going to make in your life. And so you want to be very specific and very clear about what you want to buy. So you're right, as a buyer, we become very focused on what exactly we are looking for, the community, the size of the house, and the price point that we are comfortable with. So all that comes in very handy when we are finally ready to make that offer on a house, because now we know it real well, right? We've compared the communities, we've compared the size, we've compared everything there is to know.
Well, and also, if you think about it, most buyers do not look at two houses and pick one of the two and make their decision. They look at 10, 20, 30, 40 houses, and then it's from a large pool of houses on the market that they finally base that decision. In the example I gave a little bit earlier with the 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2,000 square foot home, suppose that there were two model matches, and one was for $550,000 in the same neighborhood as a $500,000 house. And if the buyer toured the $550,000 house versus the $500,000, they might say, well, the $500,000 house has a smaller lot. It's right off of a busy road. It kind of needs painting all throughout. It has outdated appliances in the kitchen. They're kind of white and they're scratched. And then they look at the $550,000 house and they say, oh, this is freshly painted. I don't have to do that. I like the color. It's on a quiet cul-de-sac street. I'm not going to hear the traffic. The lot's larger, so there's going to be room for the kids to play in the backyard. And it's already got brand new stainless steel appliances. And in fact, they're the ones I really, really liked. And suddenly, that extra $50,000 for that house seems like a good value and work that the buyer doesn't have to do. So that buyer then says, hey, this is a good value for me. Let's go for that $550,000 house. I'm going to put an offer in for that. So they have that hyper awareness of all these little different nuances. And for that reason, I'm going to say that the buyer really has this very intimate knowledge of the value of a house.
So what you're saying is, for those very exact criteria that the buyer is looking for, they kind of become the experts in that micro market, right? They know, they have seen several houses. They have seen the updates. They have seen the condition. They have seen, like you talked about, whether the house is in a cul-de-sac or near a major road. So basically, the buyer knows best about the house. Is that what you're saying, right?
Yeah, exactly. And when you stop and think about it, it's impossible for even the best realtor to become that hyper-focused in every single market, even if it's in their community. There might be 30 neighborhoods in their community. They can't be that hyper-focused because they don't go out and look at every house like that particular buyer does. So that particular buyer for that particular house is the expert on what the value of that house is worth.
So the bottom line is that everyone involved should do their homework well, whether it's the buyer or the seller. They should really research what is happening in their neighborhood. They should really focus on the criteria that matters rather than have a personal attachment to something. And, especially for the buyer, look for a good real estate agent who is an expert in that community. Same goes with the seller, I think. They should also know who's an expert so that their home is not underpriced.
Yes. And so both sides, it's good to have good representation. And maybe that's a little bit surprising that we're saying the most knowledge is the buyer.
Yes.
Second most is the realtor. And the third is the seller. So just sort of interesting thoughts today. Thank you for joining us. Again, my name is Eric Fox, Chief Economist here at Veros Real Estate Solutions.
And I'm Reena Agrawal, Senior Research Economist at Veros.
And don't forget to follow us on RiskWire on Apple Podcast and Spotify, and also subscribe on our YouTube RiskWire channel. Thank you again.
Thank you.